Just a second to view it on YouTube. Okay, we're in. So, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thanks for watching my show. Thanks for my dear guests, gentleman Dr. E. Michael Jones and Frodi Midjord from Skanza Forum. Gentlemen, thanks for accepting my invitation, and thanks for joining me tonight for debating, for commenting on this couple of issues that intrigued me in these days. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good afternoon, I should say.
Good afternoon in America. Yeah, it's
always morning in America.
It's always morning. We discussed that we will comment on 3 different issues, and the first issue I wanted to comment with you on is this tweet I saw on Twitter. I hope we can share it with audience. Just a second. Just a second. Casey on Twitter. Casey on Twitter. I will just, for a couple of moments, I will get the full screen for the audience. I hope they can see it. Okay, Casey on Twitter wrote this tweet. These are the Black Lives Matter arrested last night. Notice anything odd? And this tweet is basically contains, I don't know, 15 pictures of members of Black Lives Matter, and none of them, not one member of Black Lives Matter members arrested is black. What's going on here, gentlemen? Isn't this really odd? Perhaps Dr. Jones can comment first.
It's really not odd at all, because what I've been saying all along is that the terms black and white are fictions. Frodi was kind enough to invite me to Zagreb to debate that issue, and we were supposed to have that debate in May. And since that time, all of the events that have happened have simply confirmed what I was going to say back then in Zagreb, that the whole idea of race is, first of all, it's a category of the mind. It is not a category of reality. The shape of your nose, the color of your skin, all this type of stuff, the kind of hair you have, these are categories of reality that get mobilized into a construct of the mind that is known as race. And then the concept of race gets mobilized as a political weapon. So what I was saying is that at the original debate was that white was a construct of the mind. Well, now it becomes perfectly obvious that black is a construct of the mind as well, because you don't have to be black to be black. So what is going on here? I think if we look at the document that describes the Black Lives Matter, what we're saying, it's not black at all. The founders wrote a manifesto. It's on the internet, or it was, and they talked about homosexuality. They talked about gender ideology and all this type of stuff. I would lump all of this type of stuff together and say what we're really talking about is the Jewish revolutionary spirit. and as an American, I have a particular insight into this because for virtually the entire 20th century, the Jews had tried to mobilize the Black people of the United States of America as the revolutionary avant-garde. For 70 years now, groups like the ADL, the NAACP, which are Jewish organizations, have tried to create race war in the United States of America. Now, that Black Jewish alliance reached its culmination with the Civil Rights Movement. It collapsed in 1967, and then it was resurrected. And it was resurrected by a Jew by the name of George Soros. So, what we're talking about here is basically the Jewish revolutionary spirit once again trying to create race war in the United States by weaponizing categories like black and white, which are categories of the mind.
Excuse me, Frodi. It shows that you okay. You're okay now. It showed that you muted your microphone.
Yeah, I just mute myself when I don't speak to not disturb the other person. But yeah, obviously, well, I don't agree that black and white races don't exist. But I'm not going to debate Dr. Jones on the topic that I've invited him to debate in a future Scanza forum. Obviously, we had to postpone that debate because the whole COVID situation prevented us from traveling to Zagreb. So we have to do it, and I hope Dr. Jones agrees to do it after this whole debacle is over with COVID, because I think many people are looking forward to it. I'm not going to debate the point whether black people or white people exist or not. Black Lives Matter isn't an organization that only includes black people. Obviously, it's a political trend. It's a political movement that is well financed. It is a sort of a revolutionary movement in a sense. But what I think is interesting is that obviously everyone on the pictures were white, and they were kind of freaks, for a lack of better words. These are the people who are mobilized in this movement because they don't fit in a normal society, really. And they are supported by the mass media, they're supported by the legal system, they're supported by the state, and they're supported by the academia, intellectual academia, the mainstream academia, and still they identify as victims. That is quite an hilarious combination if you just think of it, because you can see, if you compare how they're treated compared to how right-wingers are treated when they end up in a conflict with each other, the discrepancy is huge, obviously. So yeah, they see themselves as victims, and they are motivated by a sort of ressentiment, a sort of a feeling of inferiority, a violent anger that is motivated by a justified feeling of inferiority, because they are really sort of bottom feeders, I would say, these kind of people, and they're mobilized as a battering ram against everything that's normal in society. So yeah, the Antifa they're used by this movement, and they're not treated when they are violent. The mass media encourages them to be violent against their political opponents. And we have to remember what terrorism means. What is terrorism? Terrorism is simply the use of violence in order to intimidate your political opponents, in order to silence them. And that is the whole rationale behind movements like Black Lives Matter and the Antifa. They use violence, they burn down stores, they create havoc in order to get their will, and that is accepted because they come from the left, but from the other side of the political spectrum, that would be seen as a terrorist organization, and it would be shut down immediately.
Frodi, is there anything similar
Yes.
to what happens in America? For example, in Slovenia, we have some similarities to that situation in America. We have had many demonstrations in Slovenia in 25 years or what so of our independence, and it always comes to the fact that the most passionate protesters against often or always right-wing, so-called right-wing governments are people, are children of privileged ex-communist functionaries. For example, is there anything similar to that in Scandinavia, in Sweden, in
Most definitely, yes. And this is something that you have to keep in mind when this whole Black Lives Matter trend started, all the rioting and all the chaos and all the violence, is that it didn't just come out of nowhere. Because, first of all, they, of course, tried to start it with this black, quote-unquote, jogger, Ahmaud Arbery. That didn't work. So they kicked it off with this George Floyd character. Now you have to ask yourself, George Floyd, a criminal who was restrained by the police, he died of a mix of factors, including a drug overdose, obviously. And why is that world news? In a normal situation, that is a common thing that happens, that a criminal dies of a lot of factors, including drug overdose. Now that in a normal situation, that is justified to be a minor piece in the local newspapers. It's not justified that is national news, and definitely not international news. It's very odd that I hear about a case like that, like the death of George Floyd, for days on end in Scandinavia, when it's actually in the grand scheme of things, it's a trivial thing that happened. It's a very normal, regular thing. It happens every day. So this is an event that's created by the media, and just like you said, yes, the Black Lives Matter trend, the chaos, the tearing down, the destroying buildings, smashing windows, attacking the police, that happened in Sweden, that happened in England, all over Europe. So that isn't just a local trend in America, of course. And yes, the violent left, they are middle class youths often, and they are protected by the mass media establishment, because many of them have parents and other relatives that work in the mass media establishment, and they are the sort of second generation 68 left, 1968 leftist wave. They are the kids often of those leftists from that generation, who are now the establishment in Europe.
Dr. Jones, one of the viewers told me if I could ask you if you could move your microphone a little bit more near towards yourself.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
I could hear you just fine before, but obviously the viewers couldn't.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Do you have another comment on this situation, Dr. Jones?
Yeah, I think we're talking about 40 years of bad education. No, let's go back more than that. 60 years of bad education in America. I'm talking about the United States of America. In 1954 was a crucial year in terms of the Supreme Court approving social engineering in the United States of America. Two decisions: Brown versus School Board, which is the education decision, which struck down segregated schools, and Berman versus Parker, which was the urban renewal decision, which allowed oligarchs basically to come in and tear down your city if they had a plan to build it up in what they thought was better. So beginning with that, there's also something else that happened in 54. A book came out called Protestant Catholic Jew by a Jewish guy who wrote for National Review. And he talked about, in that book, he talked about the ethnic makeup of the United States being based on religion, specifically a sociological theory called the triple melting pot, which says that after 3 generations, no matter where you come from, you assimilate in America as a Protestant, a Catholic, or a Jew. Okay, obviously that's the 50s. Muslims weren't part of the society then, so it might have to be modified. And so what you had here in 54 were basically 2 paradigms being established. The one was the ethnic paradigm, and the other one was the racial paradigm. Now, the ethnic paradigm is, in my feeling, is it's true. I think it's accurate. It's an accurate understanding of the way people identify. It's an accurate description of what happened in the country up to that point and even after that point. But that's not the narrative that the government got behind. The government got behind the racial narrative. And at that point, they started to portray people as black and white. Okay. Now, these people did not know they were white for the most part. These are European immigrants. And when you wake up in Vilnius and look in the mirror, the first thing that pops into your mind is not that you're a white guy. You're a Lithuanian. Okay, this is the transformation that took place over this time. And I'm saying it's deliberate. And I'm saying what we're talking about here is identity theft. And I'm saying it is happening to this day. The racial narrative is being posed on a situation in a way that does not fit, because the oligarchs know that if you get people to identify as white, they lose the battle immediately, because all white people are racist. And all racists have no rights, and you immediately win the argument. This is what happened. So if you take what has happened over this summer in the United States of America, you have a wave of people, a wave of incidents of tearing down statues. Okay. The crucial incident from my point of view, and I wrote about this in Culture Wars, was what happened in St. Louis. In St. Louis, a group of people assemble and they say, we're going to tear down the statue of King Louis IX, who also happens to be a saint. Well, how does this fit into the Black Lives Matter narrative? Was he black? Did he have slaves? Did Louis IX have slaves? In the black slaves in France in the 13th century? Did he have a cotton plantation in Paris that we don't know about? No. No, what we're talking about here is an imposition of identity on a group of people. So who were the people who were really upset about the statue being moved? Well, they were Catholics, because he was a Catholic, he was a saint. And so what does the leader of this movement to tear down the statue, named by the name of Umar Lee, what does he do? He says they're white supremacists. White supremacists are gathering at the statue. Now, he knew what they were. They're praying the rosary. Do white supremacists pray the rosary? No. So these people, they're Catholics. They're defending their identity as Catholics, and he's engaging in identity theft. So I enter the equation by publishing the article on the internet, and then Umar Lee immediately challenges me to a debate. Now, the Catholics at this point said, don't come. Don't come. We don't want you to debate this guy. We're afraid we'll be called anti-Semites because we're going to be associated with you. Okay? But I'm saying that statue is still standing. It's one of the few statues that did not get torn down in the summer. And I'm saying it's still standing because that group of people, in spite of themselves, these stupid Catholics, in spite of themselves, rejected the identity theft that was being imposed on them by Umar Lee. I'm saying this, if you want to understand the culture wars, you have to understand this type of dynamic. This is an American thing that's being imposed on the entire world, and it goes all the way back to the social engineering that began in 1954 when the Catholic ethnics were driven out of their neighborhoods, and when every single kid was forced in the public school was forced to learn the civil rights movement. Every black kid that goes to school learns 2 things. He learns Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, and that's all he learns. That's all he learns. So what you have is an educational system that's training these people to be revolutionaries. Put all those things together, and you see what's happening right now. It's all coming to fruition right now.
I have this thing with ontological fine mechanics about the existence of whites and blacks. and I have to ask you this. Although there are people that consider their tribes and themselves as being eternal, for example, I won't name them, but there are people that consider their tribes being eternal. But aren't ethnicities historically contingent to? And if they are historically contingent, then doesn't it follow from your way of thinking that ethnicities don't exist too? And if we go further, isn't being having a Catholic identity historically contingent too? And if it is, doesn't it mean, considering your criteria for something to exist, that also a Catholic identity doesn't exist? Please correct me if I'm straw manning you.
I'm going to correct you. You've obviously studied Jacques Derrida. This is the guy who you're trying to deconstruct the narrative here. Okay, let me make a distinction. I talk about the distinction I'm going to make here. Okay, categories of the mind, categories of reality. Donald Trump voters, people who voted for Donald Trump in 2016, is that a category of the mind or a category of reality? That is a category of reality. We can identify those people. I'm one of them. I have a name, I have an identity, and so on and so forth. Hillary Clinton called this group of people a basket of deplorables. Now, is that term a category of the mind or a category of reality? That's obviously a category of the mind, not even just a general category. That's a category of Hillary Clinton's mind. And so when you're talking about this, I am saying that white has always been a category of the mind. From its inception, it's always been weaponized in one way or the other, whether whites are superior and blacks inferior, or now we have the opposite, whites are inferior, blacks are superior. It's always been a category of the mind. I'm saying that ethnicity is not. Why am I saying that? Okay, because first of all, I don't want to talk about American ethnicity. It's completely exceptional. It's anomalous. I want to talk about Slovenia, or I want to talk about Africa, East Africa. Okay, there are 76 different ethnic groups in Tanzania. They all are black. They all look the same to me. Okay, what is the difference? It's language. And I'm saying the basis of ethnicity is language, and language is a category of reality. That is not a category of the mind. And it's not being weaponized here. This is the same situation with small nation states like Slovenia. Okay, you are in the process of being colonized. Okay, migration is being weaponized in Europe in the same way that migration was weaponized in the United States of America during the 50s and 60s, when you had all those black people coming up to the Catholic ethnic neighborhoods of the North. Same thing is happening right now. And you are being lured into the trap of identity theft as well by identifying as white. Now, the last time we talked, Tom Sunich popped up on the screen. Okay, Tom Sunich is the classic example of what I'm talking about. He's a Croat. He's a Croat because of his language, and yet he's telling me he's a white guy. Well, why are you a white guy, Tom? You're not an American. If you said you were an American, I could sort of understand. I see absolutely no reason for him to adopt this pseudo identity based on a situation in the United States of America. I think if it spreads throughout Europe, you're going to have the same catastrophic effect that the white boys had in Charlottesville. That's what's going to happen.
I totally understand your argument, but intuitively, for example, if you have Slovenia is a very small country. You have 2 million inhabitants here, and intuitively, please correct me if I'm wrong. If you change them, if you interchange them, if you bring into Slovenia geographically, I mean, 2 millions of Namibians, for example, and you teach them Slovene language and about Slovene culture and Slovene history, and you even bring them to identify as Slovenes, does it follow from how you think about race that you still have Slovenia and Slovenes?
No, obviously, we're talking, that's not something that happens naturally. That's a weapon. That is a weaponization of migration. And I'm not saying that I'm admitting that is a weaponization, and it should not happen. And you need, if it comes to it, you need military force to prevent that from happening. That's not assimilation. I'm saying assimilation can take place. And the main vehicle of assimilation is going to be learning the language. I've been in this situation. I was in Germany. Okay. I saw other Americans in Germany. The main criterion of whether they had successful relationships or they had a successful stay in Germany was whether they learned the language or not. If you learned the language, you were part of the game. You were in the game. And at this point, obviously there were similarities here. I'm half German. My mother is full-blooded German. She doesn't speak any German though, so that means she's an American. Obviously, there are similarities. Catholicism was another similarity. I was in a Catholic region of Germany. I'm Catholic, so I'm not trying to minimize any of this type of stuff. I'm just saying that the key issue is language. It's always language. And if you have a normal situation, even with Namibians going to Poland, okay, or Slovenia, if you have one Namibian who shows up and he falls in love with a Polish girl and they get married and he learns Polish and they have children, after 3 generations, they're going to be Poles. This doesn't happen. It's not magic. It doesn't happen overnight. Even the American situation is based on 3 generations of assimilation. But the main, in America, the main crux of the thing is language and religion. And these are factors that are much more important than race, which doesn't exist as a category of reality. It's something that was created in America to manage labor problems, to keep wages down. And now, because we have the American empire, it's being extrapolated for the entire world. It does not going to work.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. Frodi, any comment, or can we go on with our video on Proud Boys?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have lots of comments. I don't know how much I should say because it's not, like I said, it's not my place to debate the issue. I have to say that this distinction between category of the mind and category of reality is flawed because all categories tend to end up in both those camps. I mean, we define our own terms, and if those terms end up being successful, they point to something in reality. You can make the distinction between rich and poor. Well, that is something that we have made up in our mind, but it's still a real thing out in reality, and we can talk about it as a factor in politics and in society. It's an important thing. When it comes to ethnicity versus race, that is also a false distinction because although ethnicity contains more than just the biological racial factor, it tends to, in a larger scope, be the race is a larger category, is a larger group than that. So ethnicity tends to be a subcategory of race. Ethnicity tends to be a subcategory of races. So we usually talk about 3 major races in the world, you know, Africans, blacks, Asians, and whites from Europe. And of course, those larger racial categories contain smaller subcategories that are ethnicities, and they are defined both by, you know, how that those groups tend to be more related genetically, but also they share a heritage, ancestry, history, language, etc. So they have other factors playing a role. And of course, if you are in a historically normal white Europe, of course, the ethnic category and the ethnic distinctions tend to be more relevant. And of course, you talk about them more, and you don't need to talk very much about the larger racial distinctions because those people haven't been present in Europe in large numbers. But the reason we talk about race today is because white white race, white people are being targeted as a race, and it doesn't matter if they live in South Africa or America or Australia or in Europe, and that doesn't mean that ethnicities don't matter. It means simply that no one talks about the problem of Kenya being too black. That the administration of a company in Kenya, it's too many black people there, it's too little diversity. But that is obviously a problem in white countries, and only in white countries. And the relevance of race today as white people being targeted, it is simply because white people are being targeted everywhere. They're not just targeted in countries in Europe or this or that country. So it is relevant that it's okay to attack white people, and white people are not allowed to have a strong identity, whereas black people are. They're encouraged to have a strong racial identity and to be very proud of that. And that is the unfairness that's going on. We have to understand that in 1965, the immigration laws in America were changed to open up immigration, and already in 2012 we passed the point where children born in America are already minority white. And another thing that happened, a major change that happened, was that the Marxists, the left, they understood that the working class that they had used as a battering ram against society, the working class didn't play along, because the working class had more conservative sensibilities than they would wish. So they created other victim groups, racial victim groups like blacks and sexual minorities, transsexuals, homosexuals, women, they're another victim group. And so what they have created in modern society is a coalition of these victim groups to tear down the rulership, the leadership of people who are white and heterosexual, the traditional ruling class of white societies. So yeah, this is a sort of a revolt against that, and that is why everyone is on board with Black Lives Matter, but you're not allowed to say that white lives matter. A person flew a banner with an airplane over in England earlier this year, that's saying that white lives matter. He lost his job, and even his wife lost his job. And then there was a woman from India, also in England. She said that white lives don't matter. Well, she kept her job at the University, I believe, of Cambridge, and she was even promoted. Now, this shows a discrepancy of who is allowed to defend their heritage and their identity. So yes, I agree that it is an identity theft, but we are robbed of our identity as belonging to a certain ancestry. We were not atomized individuals. We belong to a race, we belong to a nation, we belong to a community and a heritage and an ancestry, and we're not allowed to celebrate that. We're supposed to be ashamed of that, and the powers that be now, they want us exterminated. Basically, it's a white genocide going on.
Dr. Jones, another comment?
Yeah, well, you just said the blacks were created. Well, that's what
I did not say that. I did not say that the blacks were created.
Well,
I said that
the black groups were created.
No, I said that the victim identity of these quote unquote minority groups were mobilized as a battering ram. I did not say that they were created as a group. I said that the narrative of them belonging to this victim category that had to rise up against white society, that narrative was created by the left when they realized that the working class didn't do its job as a revolutionary vanguard.
Yeah, at this point, I'm not sure whether we're disagreeing here or not. I mean, you're obviously saying that...
I do believe that races exist. That's where we disagree.
Yeah, in the mind of the people, of the social engineers who impose this on people. First of all, why is your identity white? Don't you have an identity as a Norwegian?
Yes.
Well, isn't that
those
enough?
two aren't in conflict? It's a wider category. White is a wider category than Norwegian.
They're two different categories.
No, okay? Norwegian is a subcategory of white.
Well,
it is just as
saying. That's what you're saying, but I don't see that as let me ask you another question. Have you been baptized?
Yes, I have. But can you see that a car is the subcategory?
Stop. If you're baptized, you're a Christian. Okay. Is that an identity? I assume you were baptized as a Lutheran, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Now, this was the identity of the Norwegians. They were Norwegian. They spoke a certain language. They had a Protestant faith. And then what I'm seeing here is that in large parts of formerly Protestant Europe, the church has evaporated as a form of identity, as giving any identity, and it's created a vacuum. And now you are taking a completely alien concept to Norway, namely racial division according to black and white, and you're imposing it on yourself. Now, you're free to do this. All I'm telling you is you're going to lose. You will lose in the same way that the people lost at Charlottesville, the way the Catholics would have lost in St. Louis. You will lose. Do you want to lose or do you want to win?
You're changing the topic. So this is the thing. Yes, it is. So is a BMW a car? Yes, it is, but it's also a BMW. That is, a car is a wider category than the BMW. A BMW is a specific instance, a specific case of the wider concept car, just as Norwegian is a specific case of the wider concept white race. It's just a wider category. There is no conflict between the two categories. That's a false distinction.
Alice, you're going to have to help us here. We need some type of philosophical. We need some type of philosophical clarity here. Situation.
I would make a distinction between ontological discussion and discussion about how to behave in the real world. For example, I can totally understand your argument, and I can hypothesize that if all the white people in America would say, we're not white, we're, for example, I'm Protestant, Frodi would say, I'm Protestant, or I'm a pagan, or I would say, I'm a Catholic, I'm Slovene, and some people Jay Dyer would say, I'm an Orthodox,
right,
and so forth. If we all behaved in this way, then yes, they would lose their weapon against us. This is true. Right. This is totally true.
And there's something else I'd just like to ask Frodi. When did Norwegians become white?
Well, they were always white.
Well, wait a minute. You mean there was the time of the I don't know, the Middle Ages? They were Vikings at a certain point. Okay. Do you mean that how would they know they were white because they'd never seen a black person? How did they know?
You don't have to know that you're white. You don't have to know that you're white to be white. Just as you can die. No. You can die from. No, you can die from. No, you can die from cancer without knowing that it's cancer. Cancer exists independently of whether you know it or not. You belong to a racial category. You belong to this human species. You don't have to know that concept. You still belong to it. You belong to vertebrates. You don't have to know the concept vertebrate to actually belong to the group of I mean, dogs belong to the group. No, but listen to me. Dogs belong to the concept, or they are a part of the concept of vertebrates. They don't know that because they don't have that concept. They don't have that word. That is not a necessary condition to actually belong to that category.
Did any Norwegian, did Eric the Red ever refer to himself as white?
I don't know. It's impossible to know. That doesn't matter for the discussion. That's a completely separate question.
Now, wait a minute. We can know certain things. If you look at the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary, according to historical principles, you can look up the word white, and the word white, obviously in referring to a group of people, came into existence at a certain period of time. And it came into existence in the early 17th century at the same time that the Virginia colony came into existence. The Virginia colony needed the term white because they had white indentured servants and they had black chattel slaves from Africa, and they had to distinguish between these two parts of the working class. That's when the term white came into existence in the English language. It did not exist as a racial designator before that time.
I've already answered that point. And the point is that you don't need the word for the reality of the phenomenon to exist. Just like you don't need the word cancer for the disease of cancer to exist. People die of all kinds of diseases they don't know the word for. There is a difference between reality and the word that describes that reality. And yes, we can invent all kinds of different words. The reality of the biological phenomenon of race existed long before it became an interesting thing to study.
So you're saying you can be white and you don't know you're white?
Definitely, of course you can.
This is.
I agree. If objective reality.
Well, it can't. If you don't know it, wait a minute. If you don't know it, it cannot be your identity.
Well, the identity is you. I'm not really sure what you mean by identity. You belong to a race as a biological concept. A bird doesn't know that it is a bird. It doesn't have that word. It doesn't have that word. It's just a biological category. It belongs to that biological category.
We're talking about human beings who have
I know, but human beings are also biological creatures.
If I sailed to Norway in the 11th century and I said, "What is your identity?" they would never have said white.
Of course not. But because that wasn't relevant in that context.
But it can't be there if it's not
your primary.
If you don't know it, it cannot be your identity.
Of course, you use different. You categorize yourself in different ways in different contexts. I mean, that's like saying if I ask you a question, are you a man or a woman, and you say, well, I'm a man. Well, didn't you say that you're a Catholic? Isn't that you don't have only one identity? Of course, the relevant category that you belong to is different in different contexts.
Okay.
Of course, in a country where everyone is white, you don't make the distinction because it's taken for granted. It's taken for granted.
It's not your identity.
It's taken for granted because everyone else is white. Of course, you start discussing the topic when you encounter other people that don't fall in the category, and then it becomes, oh, this is an interesting phenomenon because we meet other races and we make the distinction. They had the concept of white existed in Viking Age. They called black people blue men. And blue because
they had to make contact with them before they could make the distinction.
Before they had a word for it. Yes. You don't need a word for it for the biological fact to exist. I've already, for example, the category of vertebrates. A dog is a vertebrate. A dog
does not have an identity. A dog does not know what he is.
A dog belongs to a biological category by virtue of its evolutionary ancestry, by characteristics.
It can never know what it is.
No, you don't have to know. You don't have to know it.
But I'm saying you do have to know it if it's your identity, and only human beings can have an identity. Dogs cannot. Dogs have identities imposed on them by human beings. Human beings have identity because of who they are. Any ethnic group in the world has an identity based on their language. Generally, the primitive ethnic group will say, what is the word for your tribe? Well, it's humanity. We are human beings. And those other people on the other side of the valley, they are the people who eat rattlesnakes or something like that. That is primitive ethnicity. You could not have a group of people without an identity. And to say their identity is based on something they don't know is preposterous. It's preposterous. It can't exist.
But what if we imagine Slovenes as being a primitive tribe, a primitive ethnicity? Are they ethnicity if they don't meet Croats?
Sure they are, because they speak Slovenian.
Yes, but if there is no different language,
that's not a binary thing here. That's not binary. Your language exists. If there were no other language in the world, you would still speak Slovenian, and that would still be the basis of your identity because that's how you look at the world. That's a category of nature. Ethnicity is a category of nature. Family is a category of nature. This other stuff, race, is a category of the mind that gets imposed for political purposes.
Okay, I understand now what you're saying, but I guess you could say that there's a primary identity and there's secondary identity that is historically contingent. For example, you are born into a tribe and into a tribe that speaks a certain language,
Absolutely.
but but your tribe has to meet other tribes in order to get these secondary identities. For
No,
example,
you don't need any other tribe. There are tribes that you could live in an island all by yourself, and because you spoke that language, whatever it was, you would have an identity. You don't need other people to get that identity. That's why it's a category of nature.
okay. I hope you gentlemen will discuss this topic further when you meet in Zagreb with Jared Taylor.
I'm looking forward to it.
So am I.
But thank you guys for this discussion. Let's go on with another topic that intrigued me this week. It was yeah. Let's. Yeah, I think we all get the point of what intrigued me in this video. I hope you all got the grasp of it. So Chris Cuomo, a journalist from CNN and brother from New York mayor, I believe.
Governor.
The governor of the state of New York. Yeah, he interviewed Ted Cruz, an American Republican senator, and obviously he tried to get him to denounce Proud Boys. And Proud Boys were mentioned a lot these days, these weeks, when supposedly Donald Trump didn't denounce them in first debate, and he should have. So, gentlemen, I'm asking you, why should have Trump denounced Proud Boys? I mean, I know that there are videos that show that Trump did denounce white supremacy, even Proud Boys, and so forth and so forth. But the other thing is, Proud Boys, as we will see later on in the video of Gavin McInnes, the creator of Proud Boys, they are not white supremacists at all. But my question to you is, why this hysteria? This sounds like like children arguing about of whether you should play with that guy and not play with that guy because that guy is evil and so forth and so forth. What's going on here?
Well, I'll just start then. But the thing that I think is important to bear in mind with the whole Proud Boys thing, of course, Trump did actually denounce them during the debate, but that's irrelevant.
Yeah.
The whole deal with bringing them up is a sleight of hand. It's like a magician's trick. What a magician does when on stage is he distracts you with this hand so he can make the trick with this hand, right? And what we're having in the country is that the left is burning down the country, attacking people, being extremely violent and attacking their political opponents. And what they want to do is distract everyone from that and change the topic to talking about something completely irrelevant. They love talking about the Ku Klux Klan, which hasn't existed in any relevant significance for many, many decades, but they still want to ask, do you denounce the Ku Klux Klan? It's like a magician, it's like a magical shibboleth. It's a ridiculous thing. And of course it's all about it's all about changing the topic from the real problem. That's the whole thing. What Trump should have said, he should have said that I resent the question. That is not the real issue at hand. The real problem now is that the Antifa and the BLM, they're burning down the country, destroying our country. That's the issue. You're trying to change the topic to something silly about the Proud Boys that barely exist and are not relevant at all. So I mean, that is the one thing. It's a sleight of hand. It's a trick. It's a trick of manipulation, and the Trump and everyone else needs to call them out on that. And the second thing that we need to keep in mind is that this only shows that the only thing that the quote unquote left, if we use that term, the political establishment, the leftward drift of the establishment, the only thing they have left is negative legitimacy. I mean, they can no longer say that we're going to do this great thing. This is the great thing we've created in society. Everyone sees that the society just collapses under those values. But they can't say that they're creating anything actually attractive and anything good. The only thing they can say is that at least we're not as bad as those evil Ku Klux Klan or the Nazis or something like that. They always have to bring up the boogeyman because they have nothing positive to bring to the table. That's why they have to make these silly things and point to the Proud Boys and the Ku Klux Klan, etc.
Well, I think, first of all, I saw the Gavin McInnes video. Gavin is trying to explain what the Proud Boys are, and it sounds to me it's like a reaction to feminism, that men have no rights. That's his interpretation of it. But once again, we've got identity theft here. Okay, it doesn't matter what Gavin McInnes thinks. What matters is the category that Chris Cuomo can impose on Proud Boys, okay? And he imposes the racial narrative on Proud Boys in the same way that Umar Lee tried to impose the racial narrative on the Catholics at the Statue of St. Louis. That's what's going on here. It's a category that as soon as it gets imposed, you lose. And it's even better if you will identify with the categories of your oppressors. That's even better. And there are people who actually do that. Okay, so what's going on here is that Chris is trying to put Cruz in a bind. Okay, either if you condemn the Proud Boys, okay, that means you just lost some supporters. They're not going to vote for you. Or if you don't condemn them, well, then we got you because you're a racist and you're supporting this racist group that you should not be supporting. That's what's going on here. It's a game. It's a game, but the center of the game is, as I said before, identity theft. If they succeed in imposing their identity on you, you lose. And if you impose it on yourself, you really lose. Okay, and that's what's going on here. I've said this before, but I was at a biker rally in Sturgis. Doing an article on motorcycles or something like that. And the story didn't happen when I was there, but the story is someone yelled, "Hey, asshole," at the biker rally. And everybody turned around. Well, do you turn around when they yell, "Hey, asshole"? That's what's going on here. You have a group of people who are they're internalizing the commands of their oppressors, and they're giving themselves an identity, which means that they will lose. That's the whole game that's going on here.
Dr. Jones, do you think if Donald Trump made this semi-genius move, and when he was asked to denounce Proud Boys and white supremacists and whatsoever, if he'd say something like, "Why would I have to denounce them?" And then an interviewer would say, "Yeah, well, because you're white," or something, and then Donald Trump would say, "I'm not white. I'm semi-German. I'm
He's a German
Protestant.
Presbyterian. Yeah.
I'm
German
German Presbyterian.
Presbyterian.
My wife is a Slovene
Slovenian.
Catholic.
Yeah, Slovenian
Yeah,
Catholic.
Slovene Catholic. This would, I do believe this would shock the interviewer, and he wouldn't have anything left to say. But what would the impact be on American people?
The impact would be what happened in St. Louis. We won in St. Louis because we defeated their attempted identity theft. That's the impact. Why do we know about the Proud Boys? Well, because they've been appointed by the media to be the bad boys, and everybody's supposed to hate. We're all supposed to hate them. I hate to draw attention to myself, but I'm never asked by CBS to talk to defend a group. I've been denounced by the SPLC as head of a hate group. I'm not head of a group. I'm a publisher. I'm a writer. Okay. I reject the identity theft, and they know it, and they're not going to touch me with a 10-foot pole. The same thing is happening here now. The same thing happened in St. Louis. We have to explain what's going on. We have to explain this identity theft, and we have to have the people stand up and say, I'm not going to participate in my own destruction. I'm not going to allow you to impose these labels on me.
Frodi, any comment?
Yeah, I mean, it's many things to say. Obviously, the Proud Boys, that's a phenomenon of a society in complete destruction and nihilism. They need some sort of substitute for a Männerbund, some sort of substitute for something masculine in their lives. So they have this joke of a group that is, I don't know, they don't really know themselves, it seems, what they believe in, but they obviously reject that they're white. They're aggressively race mixed, as someone put it. They're very aggressive with this point that no, we're very race mixed. The whole point is that I don't like the distinction between left and right, but for lack of better word, the problem is that the right in America and in everywhere else is so weak. It's so defensive, and you can see that in the discussion between Cruz and the what's his name, Cuomo, that he is so defensive, he's so cowardly, he's so weak. He should just call him out on the bullshit. He should call his bluff. The interviewer's bluff, but of course he doesn't, because that's that's the idea of the conservative, I guess. But yeah, people need to stand up for themselves, and the conservative movement, the mainstream conservative movement, is completely useless because it doesn't believe in anything. It's just afraid. And it just wants to back down slowly from the leftist avalanche destroying the country. They're afraid to stand up for anything. So I don't know. It's a pathetic thing, and it just shows that it's the whole mainstream politics thing is pointless. It's useless. We need a deeper kind of philosophical discussion. We need people who actually believe in something, who have what it takes to create a sort of paradigm shift in the social debate, in the political debate, and we need to assert our own. That's definitely. I mean, that's something that I agree with. We need to assert. People need to assert what they believe in, not deny that I don't believe in this, I don't believe in that, and I'm, be defensive. We have to assert what we believe in. Of course, I believe in different things than Mr. Jones does, but this is the problem on the right, the mainstream right, is that they are cowards. They're useless cowards, all of them, and they don't. And obviously, they do. They don't. Most of them don't want to be in this kind of society, but they're afraid to say anything meaningful about it. So I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of substance there to be discussed.
You can see with conservatives like Ted Cruz that they just want to be on CNN.
Yeah,
it's more important to them to be on CNN than to stand for something.
Yes.
Ted Cruz, for example, he was a symbol. He still is a symbol of every single libertarian in Slovenia and in America who doesn't have a clue about anything, who doesn't have any identity.
That's the point. That's the point. He doesn't have an identity. He doesn't have an identity. He's trying to use conservatism as his identity. That's not an identity. That's a political party. That's an ideology. That's not your identity. And just because he doesn't have an identity, he can't defend himself. So what are you, Ted? Are you a Cuban? Were you baptized, Ted? Is that your religion? Were you baptized as a Catholic? You're a second generation Cuban. Okay, the second generation is always the weakest generation in America. Okay, the first generation speaks the language, they know where they came from. The third generation has forgotten the language, they're fully American. And the guy in the middle is the second generation, and that's Ted Cruz. He's got no identity. That's the problem.
Let's go on with the Q&A. Maybe our audience can ask you a couple of things. Okay, a question to Dr.
I just want to say that I have to go in a little moment, but
yeah.
Okay. No problem. So a question for Dr. Jones. How can you explain the thousands of biological differences in race, such as IQ, or that I can do a DNA test and it says I'm 100% European of Scots-Irish ethnicity?
IQ is not biological. There's nothing biological about IQ. If you want to talk about the shape of your nose, the color of your skin, the kind of hair you have, that's biological, and it's meaningless. Okay, let's take an instance, a category of reality. You're either right-handed or you're left-handed. That is a category of reality. No one's making that up. No one's imposing it on you. The only problem is it's completely meaningless. It can't be instrumentalized. Maybe it could at a certain point or other. Maybe there will be a pogrom against left-handed people. I mean, the Italians call sinistra, which is related to sinister. You could do it, but it hasn't happened. So what you're talking about is not biology. You're talking about IQ test. That's not biology.
Before you have a comment on this, Frodi, it's an important question for you. Our viewer asks whether the Faroe Islands should return to Norway or not.
Well, I don't think that really matters at this point. No, I kind of like Denmark. So I think it's good to be a part of the Danish kingdom.
Okay. Do you have a comment on what was the question asked to Dr. Jones?
Oh yeah, I mean that's just a false claim. There are many endless studies that show that there's a huge genetic component in IQ intelligence. There are twin studies where twins are separated at birth, genetic twins separated at birth and grow up in different environments, and they still end up with very, very similar mental traits. There's a huge genetic component in mental traits like intelligence and other mental traits as well. So that's, I mean, yeah, it's just false to claim that isn't a thing that is biological.
Now we're into what should be a whole program all by itself, which is about IQ test and the selectivity, how you can select out certain parameters and make the test say what you want it to say. If you separate like black children raised in Germany, okay, will be German.
Well, the problem
will be German because they learned their language from their mother. They will have the intelligence characteristics of their mother, and they will not fit into the categories that get used to racialize IQ tests.
The whole point is that they've tried now for decades and decades. When the when the sort of ideological orthodoxy in these sciences is that races are supposed to be equal in mental abilities, but they've never been able to produce that. So if you mention that you create a test that is devised to prove something, well, then they've failed, because they want to prove that races are equal. That is what you're supposed to believe in academia today, whereas all the tests prove the opposite, that the races are not equal in mental abilities. And the whole point, the main job of social sciences today is to sort of invent arguments for why their predictions never work, why they're always wrong about these tests, because the tests and reality shows the opposite of what they want. They wanted to show equality. Reality shows inequality, and there's a huge biological genetic component in causing that.
And there's also a cultural component, right?
Yeah, no one has ever denied that there is also a cultural component. If you take Mozart and let him have the same upbringing as Kaspar Hauser, he wouldn't be a genius. But at the same time, Mozart, you can't take any person and give him the upbringing of Mozart, and he still wouldn't be a musical genius. There is a large biological component, and there's also an environmental component. But if you have a society where people are given largely similar environmental chances, then the biological factors will be more prominent,
and the differences will disappear.
No. That's why all these equality policies.
We cannot adjudicate this unless we have actual studies at hand.
We have studies.
No.
We have studies.
Now, wait a minute. You say we have studies. I say we have studies, but we don't have studies in front of us. The paper that I was going to give, I don't have it here, okay, but I have lots of footnotes about people who talk about proving the exact opposite. We cannot discuss this because we can't get any farther, because you say the tests show one thing and I say the tests show something else. Well, we've reached an impasse here.
No, we haven't, because for decades, there has been an active policy of artificially boosting black performance, for example, in America, that has been fruitless. They're still underperforming. At the same time, Asians that started out as poor as blacks in America, now they outperform whites in these, both in scientific achievement and in they are below whites in criminality.
The category black is meaningless. Are you talking about the gangbangers on the south side of Chicago? Are you talking about Julius Nyerere? It's a meaningless category. The meaningful category here
if it's a meaningless category, you can't know that they're equal, because then it's just a meaningless assertion to say that they're equal.
I never said people were equal.
You said that there isn't a difference. You can't know that if the category doesn't exist.
If you break the category down, you get different results. And the main criterion for success in school academic success is having a two-parent family. It's not racial. It's two-parent families. This was proven by the Moynihan report. What you've done here is you've got Jewish cultural influence basically destroying the black ethnic group, the black family, through things like rap music, for all the music, the culture that they impose upon them. And then you're saying that what is really cultural is racial. That's not true.
Well, that's what the twin studies, adoption studies
now
show
we got to go
very clearly. Very clearly.
We can't adjudicate that here.
The Minnesota twin studies.
Minnesota twin studies, maybe some.
Look, you're going to have to show me how can I talk about twin studies? I don't know whether it's legitimate or not. Twin.
Well,
studies.
you made the statement
like this.
You made the statement.
There are twin studies and there are twin studies. And
yes, but you've made a categorical statement. So why don't?
What categorical?
It's very easy to just read the studies.
The category is basically when you talk about blacks as a homogeneous group. That's not true. They're not a homogeneous group.
No one says that they are. No one says that they are.
Then the test results will differ according to their family circumstances within that group. That's my assertion. That's been proven in tests. That has been shown in tests.
If you do thousands and thousands and thousands of tests, and they all show average differences, and they all show the same average differences, although the people creating the test want them to show equality, then I mean there's really no way around it. And you also see the actual physical outcomes in reality in the civilizations that the different populations create.
Have you ever been to the south side of Chicago?
No, I've never been there.
I've been there many times. Okay.
Yes.
I kind of understand the south side of Chicago, and it's not race. I'm telling you, it's not race.
Right.
This is an impasse that cannot be resolved at this point because you're appealing to tests that I don't know, I can't adjudicate, I can't evaluate.
Right. Well, yeah, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I propose you get into this debate in when you will be live in Zagreb, for example, or on some other occasion. Another question. I put down into the comment section the link to the Minnesota Twins study, and you can both read it later on. But another question from a viewer. Ask Dr. Jones why he thinks that national identities like Germans that were artificially created in 19th century by liberals are more real of identity than white race.
German identity was not created in the 19th century. The German nation came into being in 1871 as a result of Prussia conquering Bavaria and Austria. Okay, that's not German identity. The German identity goes all the way back to the time of Rome. Okay, the Romans were fighting the Germans. The Arminius or Hermann, the German, who conquered Varro and his legions on the pagan side, the German side of the Rhine, in the Battle of Teutoburger Wald, had a German identity. That was clearly a German identity. All you have to do is read Tacitus to know that they had a German identity. This is
both sides were pagan.
It doesn't matter. One side,
yes.
wait a minute.
That's centuries before Rome became Christians.
One side spoke Latin. The other side spoke German. These are two different groups, okay? But the Germans had an identity at that point. They didn't have a nation. They didn't have a nation until 1871. All that shows is you don't need a nation to have an identity.
Okay. Let's see if we have another question from the viewer. There are so many. Dr. Jones, do you have thoughts on Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict? Is it a part of the COVID scheme, or didn't you have don't you have a lot to say about it?
I do. I just wrote an article on it. It's basically Turkish imperialism. It's Erdogan being thwarted in Libya, being thwarted in Greece on the west, and still wanting to pursue this dream of a neo-Ottoman empire by prompting Azerbaijan to attack Armenia. It also goes back to the ancestral conflict that happened in 1915, which is the Armenian Genocide, when the Turks basically used the Kurds and other ethnic groups to try to exterminate the Armenians. That's a long, complicated story, and I've written about it in depth. It'll be out in the new edition of the Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. Why is it in that book? Because both now and in 1915, you cannot understand what is going on unless you take into account the Jewish revolutionary spirit. So what's not being talked about today is the fact that Azerbaijan is using Israeli weapons. The Israelis are involved in this thing. They are supporting Turkish imperialism against the only Christian enclave in Southwest Asia. That's what's going on here. Similarly, You cannot understand the Armenian Genocide unless you understand the role that revolutionary groups like Narodnaya Volia had in creating both the Young Turks on the one side and the Hunchaks and the Dashnaks among the Armenians. It is inexplicable without this paradigm, without this key to understanding it.
Dear gentlemen, we're past hour and 15 of our live stream. Do you have anything to say at the end for our viewers about our live stream? Frodi.
Well, I just want to thank you for inviting me, and I want to thank Dr. Jones, of course. I've enjoyed this conversation a lot, and I hope we can talk again. And I hope we can we can be over with this this COVID thing and this silly situation that we're all in. I hope it's over soon, so we can actually meet in person, because it's I really dislike the sort of online presence replacing the real life interaction between people, and I really want to get back to normal again. So I'm really looking forward to actually organizing the debate between Dr. Jones and Jared Taylor in Zagreb, and I hope we can all meet soon. And I want to thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes,
thank you, Frodi.
I'd like as well to thank Alish for making this debate possible. This is what has to happen. This is precisely what is this is why there are certain groups of people who are trying to shut down the internet, because they don't want this type of discussion to take place. The fundamental fact of who we are is logos. Okay, we are rational creatures, and as rational creatures, we have the ability to entertain ideas and talk about them. If you shut this down, you are going to create violence. I do not want violence. I do not want Antifa shooting people on the street. I want to expose them for what they're really doing. And I'm going to thank Frodi for taking part in this debate, and thank Alish for making it possible.
Thank you, gentlemen, and thanks to all the viewers and the ones that took questions and commented on our live stream. I hope, gentlemen, we can meet again soon. Have a nice day in America and evening in Scandinavia, and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.